Hello, my name is Dr. Tululope Alugo from St. John Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Program. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and apart from my clinical work of diagnosing and treating mental health disorders in youth, I also empower youth mental health through providing education to teachers, parents, and youth, as well as community partners that deal with youth. So at St. John Cap, we have a number of social media platforms that you can follow us on. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, also my website, www.stjohncap.com. That's cap with a double P, and email at admin@stjohncap.com. Like I said, we provide youth mental health training for schools, educators, and youth organizations, as well as mental health education workshops for parents and mental health promotion workshops for children and youth. So in this webinar, I will be talking about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I'd like to discuss an overview of ADHD, common ways it presents at home and in school. This webinar is actually targeted towards educators. I might provide some bonus information for adults with ADHD and useful strategies. So just to kind of set the scene to assess our knowledge of ADHD, I'm starting with a quiz. So imagine I'm a teacher and I have a 9-year-old in my class who is new to my class this school year. He rocks in his seat always, never raises his hands before answering questions. When asked to form a line at recess, he is never able to follow my instructions. What should my next step include? Should it include going through reports from his previous teacher, arranging to meet with a parent, advising parents that I can't teach him and therefore not to bring him to school, or talking to my school principal about tools that would help? Answer these questions with true or false. Then imagine that after a few months or weeks, BJ's mom informs me that he's now receiving treatment, doesn't have to be medication, for his symptoms. She has an upcoming appointment with her healthcare provider and is looking for an update. What information would be relevant? Recent test scores, behavior in class and unstructured school settings such as in the playground, his interaction with his classmates. Again, type true or false, and let me know what you think. So what is ADHD? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a chronic neurodevelopmental condition. What that means is that there are differences in brain structure, in brain connectivity, and the way the brain functions. It is a disability. It is lifelong, people don't outgrow it, and it generally presents in 3 ways. You can have people with predominantly inattentive symptoms, predominantly hyperactive symptoms, or combination of both. How common is ADHD? It's thought that 5 to 9% of children in Canada have a diagnosis of ADHD. It's the most common neurodevelopmental disorder, and it occurs across all ethnicities and all socioeconomic backgrounds. So it's not a disorder for the rich or the poor or Black people or Caucasians. It runs across board. What are the causal or risk factors, the causative or risk factors for ADHD? There's thought that there is a risk of it being genetic. ADHD rates are higher in biological relatives. It runs in families, is what I'm trying to say, and is highly heritable. There's a high risk of it being passed on from parent to child. Environmental factors that could contribute to ADHD include maternal stress during pregnancy, exposure in pregnancy to toxins, alcohol, tobacco, pregnancy and birth complications, reduction in oxygen supply to the brain of a newborn during delivery, psychosocial adversity, so trauma, abuse, chronic difficulty in the social environment, inconsistent parenting. Remember, because of the higher risk of it being heritable, a parent with ADHD that is not being treated may have a child with ADHD and then have difficulty with managing the child's behavior, self-regulating their own behavior, and that can also make things worse. There are some myths about ADHD that I would like to bust. ADHD is not due to bad behavior or bad parenting. It is not due to too much screen time, though those things don't help. It's not due to too much sugar. And ADHD doesn't mean low intelligence. It's important to always bear in mind a developmental perspective. As child and adolescent psychiatrists, we always look at that developmental framework and say, are these symptoms appropriate or inappropriate for this child's developmental level? So, for example, what is appropriate for a child who is 3 and running around, can't sit still, will be inappropriate for a child that is 9. So, always look at the developmental level of a child when making these assumptions or this diagnosis. People with ADHD can be quite creative, inquisitive, innovative, adventurous. They are the mischief makers in class. They're like the class clown. People enjoy, they enjoy making people laugh, people enjoy having them around. So they have strengths. It's not all bad. It's important to realize that. So, in terms of symptoms of ADHD, what kind of symptoms would you see in an individual who has hyperactive or impulsivity difficulties? They may be fidgety, squirming in their seats, constantly tapping. They may leave their seat in situations when remaining seated is expected. So they may be under the table. They may run around as if they're driven by a mortal. As they get older and it becomes unacceptable socially to be running around, they may just describe feeling restless all the time, and therefore they're squirming, they're fidgety, they're moving their hands around, wringing their hands, for example. They may be impulsive in that they cannot wait their turn. They're blurting out answers before a question has been completed. They may intrude into conversations, brought into the conversations or games, for example. Inattentive symptoms include being forgetful, distracted. They go to school and not have items they need, and therefore they're calling their parents to bring their school folders, bring them assignments. They're losing their pencils, erasers, sharpeners, paperwork. They may have trouble organizing tasks or activities or their workspace. They don't seem to pay attention or listen when you're speaking to them directly. They may lose their train of thought in conversation. You may ask them to get you an item, for example, as a parent, and they come back and go, "What did you ask me to get, Mom?" They may not pay close attention to details, so they're making mistakes. They're leaving their work incompleted. They're doodling when they should be listening or looking out of the window, for example. So this can be some of the challenges that they may face. What is the impact of ADHD? The effect on executive functioning we'll deal with later in this presentation. There are missed learning opportunities with increase in learning gaps because they're not paying attention, they can't sit still, they're unable to stay on task. You may have poor academic outcomes compared to other kids in their class. They may be involved in risk-taking behaviors that put them, they're climbing trees, they're running around, they may go off with strangers, they may get involved in legal difficulties where they're doing things that are dangerous or boundary breaking behaviors in a society. And sometimes they get involved in drugs, substance use because they're trying to manage their symptoms or because they're experimenting with their friends and don't realize the dangers of their behavior. So, what kind of strategies can be used in the classroom to improve attention in students? There's some strategies that are good for every student, whether or not they have ADHD. Having a structured environment, consistent routine, advanced warning of changes in routine, having rules for transitions if they're moving from one activity to the other, providing equal opportunities to participate in activities so they know that they will get a turn, therefore they don't need to jump ahead of others, providing clear directions that are easy to follow, visual aids so rules are posted where everybody can see them, limit distraction in the classroom, provide outlets for energy to be burnt, like running around, sporting activities, break time, Coming down to a child's level, maintaining eye contact, ensuring they're looking into your eyes when you're speaking to them before continuing the conversation, and reducing the focus on competition. For example, the urge to win may mean that behavior goes out of the window and increases the likelihood of impulsive behavior. General strategies for ADHD. For a child who has symptoms of ADHD, you want to look at providing limited distraction. So they shouldn't be sitting beside the window or at the back of the class. You want them up front, close to you as a teacher. You want to post schedules so they know what to expect and ensure predictable routines. You may want to alter instructions to be, time limited to accommodate their short attention span. You want to get to know their interests. You're kind of, using that to reel them in and encouraging learning. Regular monitoring to detect any gaps in their learning, and by all means capitalize on any of their strengths or abilities to ensure that you maintain and hold their interest. Other targeted strategies, for example, include using direct instruction, mnemonics, visual aids, manipulatives like a fidget spinner, for example, a fidget stool, noise cancelling headphones, structured note-taking sheets, peer tutoring, getting them to teach another child what they've learned. Those things can help you to hold their attention and keep them on task. Remember that kids with ADHD, or even adults, have a difficulty with executive functioning, which is the ability to plan, problem solve, or do more than one thing at a time. And this is something that you have to constantly be conscious of and help them with. To target hyperactivity, you want to increase positive behavior. That may include using rewards to reduce negative behavior. Remember, your rewards should be smart, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time limited. An example is if a child is getting out of their seat 10 times during a particular lesson, you can aim to reduce it to 8 times, 7 times by telling them you're going to get a star if you reduce it by such and such amount in this particular class. So it's specific. So that particular class, it's measurable. You're telling them what you want them to reduce to. It's attainable. You're not saying in every single class for the full day. It's realistic and it's time limited. You want to use a monitoring system, and you also have clear rules for behavior and for their conduct. To target inattention, again, chunking information to small 15-minute blocks, for example, using homework planners, double checking what they've written in their homework planner, teaching them how to use checklists. Checklists are particularly good because you actually improve mastery in a child when they realize that they can use checklists to remind themselves before they get out of their home in the morning that they have their book bag, they have their jackets, they have their assignments, they have their lunch, and so they feel like they've achieved something. So teach the use of checklists, encourage them to repeat instructions after you, use attention cues or prompts, and also, at extra time for tests at school, quiet room for tests if feasible. And so in an environment where there is structures in place to provide support for these children, ensure that you go the extra mile, advocate for your child, advocate for your student to get resources available to ensure that they get extra time, the quiet room, and so on and so forth. This can be a game changer for test taking, for example. Again, you want to provide scoring rubrics so the child knows what you're scoring them against, so they know what to prepare for. Visual aid of key steps. Sit them down and discuss their work plan for a particular assignment. They want to write an essay, ask them, what's your structure for this essay? So that way they know they have a work plan that they can work towards and help them to stay on task. Regular breaks are important, movement breaks, timed breaks, timed tasks. So you can say this task, you can do it for 15 minutes and take a break. I've seen kids who, during the era of the pandemic where people were learning online, I've had students tell me they would have the AirPods here while they listen to a lecture because then they could move around and that helped them to stay on task. So going back to this quiz at the beginning, yes, the next steps should include going through reports from the previous teacher. And I'm going to tell you why in a little while. Arranging to meet with the parents. Obviously, we want to have an inclusive school environment, so we should never tell parents not to bring their children to school. We have to find ways to work with that child and ways to support every parent. Talk to school authorities about tools that will help a child, like fidget spinners, a fidget stool, paper mates, noise cancelling headphones, all those kind of strategies that can help support a child's learning are important. A child begins to get treatment. As educators, it's important to know that you're a very important link between the healthcare provider and that child, because you can provide feedback on treatment outcomes. If the child is getting treatment, you can tell the parents whether they're doing better on tests, whether their behavior has improved, whether their interaction with classmates has improved, and all that is very important feedback for the physician they're going to see or therapist that they're going to see. So, how is a diagnosis of ADHD made? It's multifactorial. We will generally do a detailed history from the parents about the child's behavior, pregnancy history, labor and delivery, mortal milestones, speech development, for example, family history, any physical health problems, family situation, stuff like that. Then we also like to get information from school. So we may ask for feedback from school, from other sources like the visiting grandparents or cousins or a camp, for example. All that information is important. Sometimes we will go and, depending on the resources that a team has, school observations, to observe a child in the classroom or in the school playground will be important. Where there's no enough, where we don't have enough resources to actually go and do the school observation, teachers are asked to fill questionnaires that will provide feedback about a child's performance in school in structured and unstructured settings. So all that information is put together. Then the child also comes to the appointment and is observed by the physician or the healthcare provider. And older children, for example, would also fill questionnaires. It's kind of like a self-report questionnaire on how they're feeling or what they're noticing. Younger children, you'll be able to observe very quickly whether they're hyperactive or inattentive, for example. So all those things are put together in combination to make a diagnosis. So therefore, the role of parent information, teacher information is very important. And then we come to treatment. So treatment again it involves many things. The first step of treatment is education. So this, like providing this video to parents or teachers to raise our awareness of what ADHD is and what it is not, the symptoms and strategies that can help. That's the first step of treatment: education, educating parents, teachers, and even the children themselves. If there are other diagnoses that coexist with ADHD, having some talking therapy to help with that would help. Occupational therapy may be important, where ADHD commonly brings along other things like coordination difficulties, other behavioral difficulties. So teaching a parent, parent training, teaching teachers on how to manage ADHD behavior is important. For example, like the tips I gave for managing hyperactivity, improving positive behaviors, improving other behaviors that may coexist with ADHD due to other disorders. So psychological therapy, occupational therapy, coaching older kids, for example, to organize their workspace, organize their work day, manage relationships, manage self-manage as they get older, go to university, and they're not under the supervision of their parents, how to plan their work-life balance. All that is important. When non-medication options are not enough, and where there's an impact on functioning, where there are learning gaps are continuing to progress, then medication should be considered. And this has been found to help with with thinking function, executive functioning, reducing the symptoms, and improving learning. So I'm just going to leave this here, which is a link to an ADHD or an interview I did with a physician, Dr. Diana Mercado Mamarosh, who is a family physician, a clinic medical director, or nursing home medical director, who has a diagnosis of ADHD. And she has so kindly shared her life story, her journey from receiving an ADHD diagnosis, had times of denial and not getting any help because she was embarrassed by the diagnosis and the impact on her functioning. And then her journey from that point to now becoming a coach who now coaches other physicians with ADHD. Like I said at the beginning, having ADHD doesn't mean low intelligence. People with ADHD can be physicians, they can be lawyers, they can be teachers, they can be anything that they want to be, and they can function well with support. So I would encourage you to check my YouTube page for this video. It's very enlightening and I think would also help a great deal. So remember to that there's a huge role for educators in early identification, in early intervention, because which is what we're trying to promote here at St. John Cap. You want to ensure an inclusive and safe school environment. You want to encourage the development of a child. You want to support and you're able to support and implement a physician or healthcare provider's treatment plan by providing frequent feedback to parents, which they can then provide to the healthcare provider. And so remember, St. John Cap, we're available on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, via our website at stjohncap.com, and also send us an email if you're looking to provide for us to provide training to your school, to your youth organization. You want us to provide parent workshops or even mental health promotion sessions to your students. So you can reach out to us throughout any of these facilities or platforms, and we'll be happy to respond to you and to discuss our services further with you. Thank you.